Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for being with us. Hope everyone has recovered from the storm. Sorry we couldn't be with you this past Monday, but the storm took out our internet as it did for many throughout Tennessee. But we're back and we have a great show for you tonight. Let's talk about your investments, the nest egg you've been working so hard to build. How confident are you that all your investments are secure? I'm not asking about whether they are sound or not, or whether they'll give you the return you hope for and maybe were led to believe they would achieve. I'm asking if you're confident the investments in your name will still be payable to you even in the event of a bank failure. Seems like a nonsensical question, but you might be surprised at the answer and outraged at the same time. Some of you may have heard of The Great Taking. It's a book written by David Rogers Webb. I had him on a show a couple of years ago. The taking refers to certain big banks being able to collect the investments of millions of everyday citizens in the event of a financial disaster. This applies to all securities such as stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and ETFs held in digital form by your broker or advisor. How can this be true? How can it be legal? Here to answer those questions and further explain how this came about and what can be done to change it is attorney Don Grande with True North Public Policy, an LLC created to protect personal property from the Great Taking, and State Rep Bud Hulsey, one of the few solid conservatives in the Tennessee State Legislature. They will join us in a minute, but first, a word from our sponsor.
Light, the energy of life itself. Since the beginning of time, light has sustained us, fueled our growth, and shaped the world. Even Einstein recognized that everything we are is made of light. But what if we could harness the light within us, not just to live, but to renew, restore, and rejuvenate? Introducing LifeWave X39, the first product in the world that activates stem cells using our body's own light. Backed by clinical research, multiple patents, and over 10 years of stem cell research, a revolutionary wearable light technology that unlocks the power of activating our own stem cells with a single, safe, affordable, non-transdermal patch that puts you back in control of how you look, feel, and perform. Unlike drugs or chemicals, X39 works naturally, awakening your body's ability to heal and thrive. It's time to unlock your full potential, restore your vitality, and embrace a healthier, more vibrant you.
Welcome back. And before we bring on our guests, I just want to let everyone know that we've changed things up a bit tonight since we only have one show. I will do the Informer report after our guest and follow up with announcements, so please stay tuned after the interview. Don Grande is an attorney in private practice, focusing in areas of business law, trust, and estate law, real property law, and mineral law as well. He is active in public policy, primarily at the state level, on issues related to property rights, family security, and personal liberty. He's also a principal with True North Public Policy, an LLC consulting firm that works with legislators and citizens to protect personal property from the Great Taking and other threats. Information and resources are available at dongrande.substack.com and truenorthpublicpolicy.com. And our other guest tonight is State Representative Bud Hulsey from District 2, who consistently sponsors and co-sponsors liberty-minded legislation in Tennessee. He's a retired police lieutenant from Kingsport, and he in the Kingsport area and Tri-Cities area. He did his postgraduate work at the University of Virginia via the FBI National Academy, and has a BA from Bob Jones University. Well, hey, thank you both for being with us here tonight. How are you?
Great. Thank you, Dave, for having us.
Thank you, Dave.
I appreciate what you guys do. Don, we're going to start off with you. If you can tell us a little bit about True North and their mission.
Sure. Thank you, Dave. So when we got started on this issue, we've been involved with issues related to the Uniform Commercial Code for about 3 or 4 years now. Starting out with, before this issue we're going to talk about tonight, there was another issue before that we dealt with. And what happened was the people that we're working with, my wife works for a public policy advisory firm that works with state legislators, but it's a 501c3. It's a nonprofit, so it can't really get involved in what's called lobbying or anything like that. So we formed True North true north public policy, just to be a resource, a tool for legislators, and also to educate the public, which is sorely needed on this issue, separate from my law firm. So it's a tool that we put together so that we can reach out to people and just focus on these types of property rights issues.
Can you explain to the audience what UCC does in general? And UCC is Uniform Commercial Code, correct?
Correct. I'll try to explain it in a way that doesn't cause people to reach for Bud's coffee. So the Uniform Commercial Code is as it says, it's a uniform law, but it's a state level law. So the Uniform Law Commission is an entity that's been around for a long time. It's got representatives from all 50 states that don't frankly do much of anything. And then there's a cadre of special interest attorneys that are more involved in drafting the uniform laws. And so the Uniform Commercial Code has been around since 1947. And the intent behind it was so that interstate commerce would be able to move. You could buy a car in Minnesota or in Tennessee, and the rules would be about the same as they are in North Dakota or California. And so there's some, good reasons behind that. But the problem that we've got, so the Uniform Commercial Code deals with commercial activities. That means leases, renting. It means commercial transactions, like when you buy a car and you get a car loan, excuse me, you get a car loan. All of those things are governed by the Uniform Law Commission, or by the Uniform Commercial Code, which has been adopted in all 50 states. And the Uniform Law Commission and the bank lobby in particular really enforce that uniformity. They don't want anybody to step out and actually, do their own critical thinking about what the Uniform Commercial Code does. So Uniform Commercial Code's now it's got 12 articles covering different subjects. Article 12 was the new one that was out in 2022, dealing with digital assets and cryptocurrency and things like that got people a little bit concerned. That's when we started getting involved with it the first time. Article 9 deals with commercial transactions. That's bank lending. How does a bank perfect its security in the loan and that type of thing. Article 8 of the UCC that we're going to be focusing on tonight deals with investment securities.
Okay. And we've got a few slides. It might be a good time to go ahead and hit those real quick and let you talk them.
Yeah, sure. So, the Uniform Commercial Code, and specifically with regard to this Article 8 that we're focusing on tonight, is really made a significant change to property rights, at least what people believe, that when they buy something, they think they own it. And this quote from Hayek in his book, Road to Serfdom, just shows how important private property is for our society. If private property is not what you think it is, there's a whole lot of other things that are going to fall along the way. So just specifically on this Uniform Commercial Code, Article 8, and I'll try not to use too much jargon. The Article 8 deals with investment securities, and that means stocks and bonds, mutual funds, treasuries, whether you own them in your own name or it's in your IRA or 401k. We're talking about everything pretty much that you buy or sell through a broker or an investment advisor. And this specific issue we're talking about came about with what's called the 1994 Article 8 revision. And so coming out of the Wall Street crash of 1987, there was some concern on Wall Street that they needed to have some more protections for the banks. And this state law was the result of that. And what they did is a couple of very interesting things. They created a new thing called a security entitlement. So just for example, when you call up your broker, call up your investment advisor and say, I want to buy 100 shares of Apple or stock or whatever, they'll take the money out of your account and you think you actually own that 100 shares like you used to when you had it in paper in your hand, but you don't. What you have is what's called a security entitlement. That's a new concept that they came up with in the UCC Article 8 in 1994. And a security entitlement isn't private property rights like we think. It's not, you don't own it. It's what's called a bundle of rights, and that you hold against your broker. So basically, it gets really convoluted, and I don't know how deep you want to go into it, but when you buy those 100 shares, you get a security entitlement that your broker has to follow through on certain things. And if you want to sell it, the broker will sell it. If things are going fine, it still works. I mean, you can still sell the stock. If you made money, you can sell it. Money will get put back in your account. That's all fine. But what's really behind this whole thing, and got Representative Hulsey concerned, as well as myself and other legislators around the country, is that let me step back. When the Uniform Law Commission starts a process like coming up with this revision, they form a drafting committee. And the drafting committee has what's called a reporter. That's the lead guy on the drafting committee. He keeps all the notes, does most of the drafting. And the reporter for this UCC Article 8, his name was James S. Rogers. And James S. Rogers himself described this change in 1994 as Armageddon planning for the financial services industry. So you have to understand that even though this has been there and nothing's happened necessarily, no
Right.
real bad things have happened.
Same reason you buy insurance, something bad hasn't happened yet, but.
Exactly. That's exactly right. This is insurance for the big banks. And I also want to be clear, when we're talking about the banks, we're not talking about the state banks in Tennessee. We're talking about the money center banks, JP Morgan, Citibank, Wells Fargo, those types of banks. Those are the ones protected by this and by federal law. Your state level banks are not protected. They're frankly at as much risk as you and I are of losing their securities.
Well, I wonder why they haven't raised a red flag on that then.
Well, I think Representative Hulsey might have some comments about the bank lobby, but the bankers, some of them have privately to us because they finally understood what we're talking about. But by and large, they move as a block, and the block is it's a Titanic that's governed by the big banks. Most states have two different bank associations that lobby the legislature. One of them's the state level version of the American Bankers Association. That's controlled by the big banks, even though your state level banks can be in there as members too.
Right.
People that pay the freight and dictate where it goes are the big banks. Other states also have community bank associations, but those associations, in my opinion, being around the country on this issue, they follow the big banks as well. So it's kind of a herd mentality to me.
So the big banks have lifeboats, and the rest of us stay on the Titanic, right?
Pretty much that's it. Yep. And so we'll be talking about how this works. And remember, this is Armageddon planning for the financial services industry. So as David Webb pointed out in his book, and his book's available on our website at True North Public Policy, free download of the PDF. What they did is they put in two exceptions, and I'm not going to get too technical on this, but essentially it says that these are the two exceptions that Representative Hulsey is trying to have removed from state law in Tennessee. These two exceptions, word for word, are in every state in the union right now. And what it says, in ways that only attorneys can appreciate, is that if a financial intermediary, a broker or a custodian or something like that, fails, becomes insolvent, and if they don't have enough assets to cover their loans from the banks and also cover what they owe to the investors, the banks get priority, meaning they get first in line. So that can take priority over your 401k, for example. The second exception is a little more difficult for most people to understand. If the bank lends money to what's called the clearing corporation, that's the entity at the top of the pyramid in our current financial system. The bank has priority over the investor. What priority means, what these two are priority clauses, or whenever two or more people have a claim to the same asset and the legislature wants to pick winners and losers, they'll have a priority clause giving one entity first in line and the second entity loses. So in this situation, the bank, as the lender to the custodian, has a priority interest or has an interest in those in your 401k. And you, because you put the money in there, also have an interest in the 401k. But what this state law does is it picks winners and losers. And I hate to say, but you're not the winner in this situation. It's the big banks. So that's what we're up against here. And that's what Representative Hulsey is trying to fight.
Now you did a little chat GP. We have the next slide.
Yeah.
Kind of ask some direct questions. Let's go to that real quick if we could.
Yeah, that's, I'm not all into AI and all of that. And you have to be really careful when you're talking about this. You have to be really careful on the prompts, the questions that you ask, because the first time that we were asking this question, it was more in general terms. And the response back from ChatGPT sounded like it was a bank lobbyist answer. So we had to get real zeroed in here. So what we're really talking about here is that there are brokers out there or custodians on Wall Street that are pledging their customers' investments as security for the custodian's own loan. And they're doing it without your permission. And that's illegal. So what we're specifically talking about, I know it's hard to believe, but sometimes people on Wall Street bend the law a little bit or maybe even break it. So in that situation, if a entity on Wall Street uses your assets in your 401k as collateral for their loan to JP Morgan gets protected. And that's exactly what ChatGPT comes out here and says, is that UCC Article 8 favors the banks and financial stability over protecting individual investors. It's clear as day. It's that was the intent. And, because people have called us and Representative Hulsey and conspiracy theorists. This is just, conspiracy theory. This could never happen. And, so you get a little frustrated with that after a while, because it's in black and white in Tennessee statute right now. And if you even dig a little further, if you can get your hands on the statute that has official comments, or sometimes it's but it's generally official comments, and there's sections of verbiage underneath the statute that kind of explain what the statute means. Right. Now, those comments aren't law; they aren't part of the statute, but courts do use them. Courts do use them for intent, legislative intent. And you read through the comments on Tennessee Code under UCC Article 8, Section 511, and it says right in there, it talks about it. So when we get called conspiracy theorists, the first conspiracy theorists were the private interest attorneys that drafted this law, because they sat around thinking, what happens if somebody on Wall Street breaks the law and they've borrowed money from a bank with security that they didn't have permission to? And they answered with those two exceptions. They answered to protect the banks. So if I'm a conspiracy theorist, so are they, because they were asking the same question back in 1994. So it's frustrating to deal with people that, I understand the issue kind of comes at people from out of left field. You're not thinking it's possible. But it is really frustrating to be able to sit down there and lay stuff out in front of them, and they still think you're crazy.
Well, and it's been there for 32 years. I don't know if it's law, if it's been in Tennessee law for 32 years, but it's been around for 32 years. So people you're like, well, everybody thinks, well, somebody would have said something by now.
Yeah.
Not always. Hey, Bud, what Representative Hulsey, so how does your legislation address this?
Well, it tries to solve the two big problems on B and C that Don talked about. The first thing it does, it strips out that verbiage that makes the bank's priority in a dispute to get your property, and instead of them being priority, it reverses it and puts the original stockholder, or in what's called an entitlement holder now, it puts you at the front of the line and gives you priority in a dispute. And the second thing it does, one of the onerous things about the way this is set up is if your property disappeared, if they used it as collateral on a loan and the institutions go under, for you to try to file a suit to get your money back, you have to go to New York to do it. And you got to hire a lawyer up there to do it. So this bill, and Don wrote the bill, and it's precise and pristine in my opinion, but this bill says no, you can sue if you're a Tennessee resident and you bought stock here and you did your transaction here, but you live here. You don't have to go to New York to file a suit against them. You can file from the state of Tennessee under Tennessee law.
I can't imagine who in their right mind would have ever signed off on the idea that somebody that lives in Tennessee and has this happen to them has to go to New York. You talk about not caring about your people. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, but that's what this bill does is just two simple things. It just reverses the order of priority on who gets your property. You or the big bank. And it says if you got to sue to get it back, you don't have to go to New York to do it.
Now, I remember this, and plus we were talking about it right before we started, that this bill was moving through the House pretty good a couple of years ago. And then all of a sudden, I guess maybe it had one committee left or something, and I guess they brought a banker in, and the whole tone changed after that. Can you talk about that?
Well, actually, they brought a big daddy banker in at the very first subcommittee, but actually, a Democrat boy, Parkinson, was the one who took the lead on asking questions in that committee, and he was drilling right down where they live, and made it quite uncomfortable, I think, for them because they had to admit some errors on their part, which was like pulling teeth. But it actually passed that committee, all except for it had one no vote. The rest was, but this was a subcommittee. And so, of course, the next week, then it went on to the full committee. And I'm really not sure why they put it in civil justice, but they did. And in the meantime,
who's the chair of civil justice? I'm sorry, who's the chair of civil justice?
Representative Farmer.
That's why they send it to civil justice. I can tell you that, right? You know that, but that's okay.
They sent it to civil justice, and in the meantime, Treasurer Lillard had some real problems with the bill, but he was worried about it because he didn't understand it. Now, if you sit down and talk with Treasurer Lillard, and he said it to me, and I've said it to him on 2 or 3 different occasions, you can look down the road here, and a train wreck's coming. You know that. Everybody in the financial business knows you can't keep going the way we're going. There is going to be a huge train wreck. Treasurer Lillard he sees that. He knows that. But he was worried about the bill, so he asked that it go to summer study. And when we went to the second committee, they brought in some other guy. You remember Don? Was he out of the university down there? Taught the UCC coder said that.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, he was a representative of the Uniform Law Commission.
Yeah, a pretty arrogant guy. As a matter of fact, so bold as to threaten the whole state of Tennessee. In that committee meeting, he said, if you pass this bill, people will quit doing business with you, and people will quit doing business with people who do business with you. And which is just a preposterous thing to say, but there's no short supply of arrogance on that side. Anyway, the committee somebody made a motion to send it to summer study. And that's what happened. We never got a summer study out of it, but that's where it went. And then last year, I put it on the docket to run again. And last year it went in front of Commerce and Insurance Subcommittee, and boy, we failed, or I failed miserably in front of that committee. I think we got one or 2 yes votes, and the rest were no. But that's what has happened so far.
Other than the guy from the UCC, and well, so what is our state treasurer? What are his objections?
Okay, at the time he really at the time he didn't have a specific. He was just worried about it because he didn't understand it, he didn't know it. He since has actually read David Webb's book, and I talked to him just a couple of weeks ago, and I talked to him again at the end of last session, and he's okay with the bill now. He's he's okay with it. And what was interesting to me is he went to some banker friends of his, and he said, you know, would this bill hurt Tennessee? And they kind of hem-hawed around and said, well, it could. So Lillard said, how could it? Well, none of them had an answer. And so Lillard told me, he said, I'm not gonna disagree with the bill anymore. So he's okay with it. Which I'm going to try and milk at in front of this committee.
Now, was he the one who invited the UCC guy down to speak against it, or was that somebody else?
No, that was somebody else. You had asked a question before. I honestly think a lot of bankers have no idea about this. They're just ignorant of it. Yeah. And people just don't know. And I think a lot of folks in the financial business don't know. I don't think I've ever read the UCC code. But Don will tell you, you know, the past record is already in place of what happens when Lehman Brothers went under in 2008.
Yep, it's a test
Same
run.
thing happened. Same thing happened. You know, there was a wrestling match on who was first in line to get the money and get the property. And the way I understand, because it was not a bigger collapse, it was big enough, but it wasn't a bigger collapse, that some of the low-level players got their property back fairly quickly, and the banks will be quick to tell you that. But I read not too awfully long ago that I think it was like 12 or 14 years before some of them. Am I correct, Don?
Yes. Yeah. So when Lehman failed after the 2007-8 housing crisis, it was, you know, lawlessness at its best on Wall Street. But when Lehman Brothers failed, their primary lender was JP Morgan. And another entity of JP Morgan was the custodian for Lehman Brothers, meaning the entity that holds the assets in safekeeping, essentially. So on the eve of Lehman's bankruptcy, JP Morgan froze all Lehman Brothers assets. That included both the assets owned by Lehman Brothers itself and the assets in the customers of Lehman Brothers. Everything was frozen. And that just set off a big fight. Obviously, the banks that were behind, that weren't as high up, didn't get priority, were fighting with JP Morgan to get some scraps off the table. So that bankruptcy case went very, very interesting. It ended up proving what we're talking about here. JP Morgan was awarded custody of those assets, and in the bank, in the opinion itself from the bankruptcy court, it went through. It says it applied New York law, the UCC in New York State, and that gave priority to JP Morgan. And then what the judge said, all he needed to figure out then is JP Morgan in the protected class, and that's the term he used. So what decipher that, it's too big to fail. If JP Morgan is in a too big to fail class, they're protected. If it's First Bank of, you know, somewhere in Oklahoma, you're not in the protected class. So that was pretty interesting. But what happened there was that it was, in my mind, just my conjecture. This is theory, not proof here. But I think it was too early for that Armageddon planning to kick in. I think they still had a few things they wanted to do. So they wanted to fix this one kind of smoothly. So the bankruptcy trustee in this situation, so Lehman Brothers had individual customers and had institutional customers, two separate divisions of Lehman Brothers. So the bankruptcy trustee right away went around and worked with other entities. Barclays was one of them, I remember, a couple of others that were still solvent, and they sold the retail business, the mom and pop business, off to those brokers. And so those people were made whole within 6-7 months. So, but their assets were frozen before that, and you have to remember what it was like in 2008. There was a lot of panic going on, not just in DC and Wall Street. It was everywhere because people were losing their houses at a time when you might want access to your investments. You didn't have it. Now, they did get it back relatively quickly because, as I said, the bankruptcy court organized a sale of that line of business to other brokers, and those people were fine after that 6 or 7 month not being fine. But institutional customers for Lehman Brothers, and this would kind of get to your question about why would the treasurer be concerned about this. So states, pension funds, things like that, who are on the institutional side with Lehman Brothers, they didn't get that quick fix. Some got money back in 6, 7 years. Others, the final closure of that was in 2024 of the bankruptcy estate. So there was a period of time there where states didn't have access to a certain chunk of their money, or not just states, but large institutional investors. And so that proves what was here. And really the only reason that most of those institutions got their money back eventually was that, if you remember, after Wall Street crashed and all this happened, it came back very quickly. By 2011, 2012, stock market was back up. That raised the asset prices. So magically, Lehman Brothers' own assets were enough to cover its liabilities, and the assets to their customers could be released. But if it hadn't come back, they still wouldn't have been released.
They had the bailouts too, though, right? For the big banks. So we're paying twice. We're paying for the too big to fail. We pay twice. We pay through taxes to bail out the too big to fail. And then if you happen to have some holdings in one of these institutions, you're out of luck. Or at a minimum, you're going to wait a long time.
You're going to wait. And you're exactly right. So then there has been some pushback on that, that DC doesn't necessarily want to be constantly bailing out these banks. So what's happened in other countries and what could happen here would be a bail-in, where the banks would actually just fix their problem by taking a haircut out of your account. So that's another potential thing that can hit. The banks always end up on their feet, don't they?
Yeah. Don didn't, when this went to court up there, didn't the judge say, unless I'm tangled up here, didn't the judge say, based on the way the UCC's written?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do have priority.
Yeah. It did. So the judge up there was dealing with both state law under the Uniform Commercial Code, and that fit, and the bank, JP Morgan in that case, had priority. They were also looking at the United States Bankruptcy Code because it was a bankruptcy case. So that code was changed in 2005, and a safe harbor was put in. That sounds pretty good. Nice to have a safe harbor, but once you understand the safe harbor is for the too big to fail banks, that's how those two things work together, and JP Morgan came out ahead. So we don't get safe harbors. I don't know. I haven't found one yet. And in my undisclosed location here in rural North Dakota, I don't have any safe harbors, but maybe in my closet.
Hey, Bud. So now this bill will go back. What's the committee route again? Or do you know yet?
I'm assuming if it's like last year, I'm assuming it'll go in front of the Commerce and Insurance Subcommittee. I should know Monday. And we're supposed to go back to session Monday, and I should know Monday, what the bill number, it'll be posted on there, what the bill number of this UCC bill is and what committee it'll be assigned to. Now, before it goes to the committee, I have to put it on notice first. But it should come out Monday on the bill number and what committee it'll be assigned to.
Have you had a chance to talk with any of the committee members ahead of time about this and see what kind of support you can get?
I've actually, Don hasn't said anything, and I haven't either, about a new movie coming out. I forgot the name of it, Don. It's
Retirement Reset, I think.
Yes, that's what it is. And there was a 60-second trailer on that movie, and I sent that to committee members, and then I sent the whole hour one to committee members and the chairman too, asking them to watch it because it explains why this bill is so important. so that's as far as I've got so far. Now I'll visit each one of them then. But what I need is, people are busy, and,
Yep.
and especially now. I mean, you're just trying to make a living and stay alive and be able to buy food and pay your bills. And so most people don't have a lot of time to keep up with what's going on down at the State House. And the general paradigm is that, your state legislators are looking out for you and they're making right decisions for you. I believe that for a long time until I learned that really doesn't happen all the time. But I need people who will contact the legislators sitting on these committees and say, look, you need to do this. And particularly if you have a committee member that's from your district, you need to hammer them.
Right.
Because people listen, legislators listen to people in their district.
Correct.
Right.
But the problem is most folks, they're busy and they don't have time to keep up with it. But I'm telling you, I need this.
We need it.
If I'm going to be successful with this,
That's the key.
I've got to get folks who contact them.
Hey, Don, have you had any success in other states on this issue?
Not to the finish line. We did get it to the floor in South Dakota and Wyoming last year. Got defeated on the floor. So other than the Tennessee committee last year, we've had a lot of success at the committee level. If we're able to sit there and answer their questions, show them black and white what's in there, we've had some success. But then when it gets to the floor, none of those people have heard about it. It's just deer in the headlights. And so we haven't had any success at the floor because people just aren't aware of the issue. And this gets back to what Representative Hulsey was saying, is that constituents in the state, in Tennessee in this example, really need to, they don't have to get educated so they can answer all the questions. Just point them to some of the resources that are out there and get in front of their representatives and their senators, because we need to get a broader understanding among the legislators of what actually is going on here. Because
right.
In the vacuum, the bank lobby's talking in their ear and saying, there's an election coming up in November.
Yeah.
Maybe we won't be supporting you or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that's what the citizens. That's what the citizens need to be saying to the legislators about this.
What happens a lot of times too is you get down in the weeds with this stuff and it gets complex. I mean, I don't understand all this. Don knows 100 times more about this than I do. You can get down in the weeds pretty quick. And what happens in a committee is you're trying to explain some of this. And if Don came in both times, 2 years, flew all the way down to address. And so did David Webb. David flew in from Switzerland and they both testified in front of the committee. Well, when you dump out a whole bunch of information and the committee members are not familiar with it, and I understand them not being familiar with it because I wasn't familiar with it either. Well, what happens, it gets confusing very fast and gets convoluted and complex. And the tendency then is for committee members to defer to who they think the professionals are. And in this case, if you've got three bank lobbyists sitting in front of there testifying how bad this bill is and what it'll do, and there's no need for it, it's unnecessary, then the tendency is for the committee to defer to who they think is the professional in the room. And that's what happens a lot of times.
Yep. And yes, I can just add to that. So they have the in-state bank lobbyists, people they've worked with for session after session. Most of those bank lobbyists don't understand what they're talking about. They're just they're reading the script, right? Because the one thing that legislators don't like is if a lobbyist leads them the wrong way or lies to them. So I wouldn't say that these lobbyists are necessarily lying. I think they're just doing the party line. But then on the other hand, you had David Webb coming in from Sweden and me, an attorney from North Dakota. And we're the only two there. And people are saying, well, so you two came up with this? And then they're just going to go to the lobbyists that they've been dealing with for all these years. In South Dakota last year, David Webb and I were there. David Webb and I, almost sounds like a webinar. David Webb and I were testifying, and we did get it through committee. It went to the floor, but one of the committee members said, I don't have any constituents asking about this. Why isn't there anybody from South Dakota here, any citizens pushing us on this? And my answer was, they don't know. They're not aware, because we haven't been able to get the word out. That's why programs like yours are so important. Just to make people, public awareness on this is huge, because that leads to what Representative Hulsey was talking about. That bank lobbyists are powerful, but if your constituents are up in your inbox and on your phone, that's pretty powerful too. And that did turn one of the representatives in Tennessee the first year. He had a couple of constituents contacted him, people that he knew, because we're all creatures of habit. We're more, if somebody more familiar with us, who we've got a track record with, comes to us with a issue, we're more likely to listen to them than we are some guy from North Dakota that showed up. It's just human nature. So a couple of people had reached out to that gentleman who's between the two House subcommittee and the committee meetings, and he was starting to switch over to our side just based on that. So it doesn't take a lot of people. We did have 2 or 3 people, citizens, show up last year for Representative Hulsey's bill, but that committee it was a done deal. It was in and out, thank you, ma'am, and they didn't even get a chance to testify. So, but we just have to keep doing it. That's really the only way to get across the finish line, is for people to be up in arms on this. And like Representative Hulsey said, everybody's busy. There's a lot of issues out there. You deal with them on your podcast. There's so many issues out there. It's hard to get people focused on one. But this is a big one, and it won't take a lot if we can get some people behind it and supporting Representative Hulsey.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Bud.
I was just going to say that the fear is not for a local broker to collapse.
Yeah.
Or even somebody closer to Lehman Brothers. That's not the fear. The fear is a universal, global, or pretty close to a global meltdown in the financial world. But it's not just that. It's the ability for the big globalists who control this to intentionally melt it down. It's orchestrated. Kissinger, I read a book many years ago called The Fourth Reich of the Rich, written by a guy named Des Griffin. And when I was scared to death when I got done reading the book, but in there was a quote from Henry Kissinger. Kissinger said, if you want to control people, you control food. If you want to control nations, you control oil. If you want to control the world, you control money. Now, if you have an orchestrated global collapse, done on purpose, that wipes out everybody's wealth. Therefore, you have no financial freedom or liberty anymore. You move in a central bank digital currency. Now everybody is a pauper, and everybody is dependent. And the problem with central bank digital currency, boy, all your rights are gone. And the sad thing about it is, people think, just like in state legislators, they've got their retirement in the TCRS system. There's over $90 billion in TCRS, and so do I. I was a police officer for 36 years. My retirement's in there.
Right.
This would wipe all that out. And my retirement's gone, and so is anybody else in this kind of scenario. If you have a meltdown like that, you don't get it back.
The interesting thing, that to follow up on Representative Hulsey there, because people ask me this question when I'm testifying or when I'm trying to speak to a group on it or whatever. They say, well, why do those oligarchs, why do the people controlling everything need my 401k? And I tell them they don't need it. The big banks, the Fed, doesn't need my 401k or yours, because they can just print money.
Right.
But what people have to understand is they can't afford for us to have it, because
they want the control.
If we have the property, then we're in control, because slaves don't have property, right? So that's the really nefarious aspect to this. because it's not like this will be triggered so that Wall Street can make more money. I mean, they're naked shorts, they're doing all sorts of screwy stuff up there, and they're printing money hand over fist. This isn't for that. It's to take it from us so that we're
dependent. Yeah.
Well, wasn't the World Economic Forum that said, you'll have nothing and be happy?
Yep.
Yep.
That's exactly right. I always say, I think I said it in that documentary. I said that this whole UCC Article 8 has a certain WEF, you'll own nothing and be happy ring to it. And I think that's the end game.
You know what scares me so much about that statement by Schwab is the arrogance and the assurance that he has when he says it. In other words, he is convinced 100% that this is going to happen.
And we can't do anything about it, but we actually can if people will wake up. And one of the big problems is the people that pay attention to politics, even in Tennessee, way too many of them only pay attention to national politics. They don't pay enough attention to state politics, and that's a big problem. Well, but this is one we can fix. This is a big problem we can fix at the state level.
That's the nice thing about the Uniform Commercial Code. It's a state law, so it can be fixed at the state level. We don't have to go to Washington and try to get Congress to do something, which they're not going to do.
Well, I've said this for a long time. If we're going to salvage this republic, it's not going to happen from the federal government.
No,
they can't salvage anything. If we're going to salvage this republic, it's going to happen when state legislatures do so. Yep. That is the only answer is state legislatures.
And I think starting with property rights, it's the foundation for our freedom. If we don't have property rights, we're going to be fighting a pretty tough battle.
Absolutely. Now, I think we've got your website, True North, and that's where they can get more information on this.
Yeah, so we've got a website up there that's got some of the information. It's got some videos of the Tennessee hearings that we were at, some of those wonderful people that were testifying in opposition. So you can find those on there. And it's True North, it's TRU, no E, TRU North, publicpolicy.com. And you can find everything there. There's a link to David's book, free PDF download. You can also buy a hard copy. If you're like me, I like to have actual hard copies of certain books. And so that's available on there as well. And then on our Substack, it's just dongrande.substack.com. I try to break this concept down into shorter articles, shorter pieces, like 500 words. And I try not to get too jargony in there. But I think people might find some of that information helpful as well.
Thank you. And Bud, you said that probably by next week, the bill will have a number.
Yes, sir. It should be. It should have a number and be on the General Assembly, Tennessee General Assembly website, and it'll say UCC on there on my list of bills, and then and you can pull that up by a number on the bill finder list, and it'll tell you what committee it's assigned to. When I put it on notice, then it'll kick up. By the way, I was going to tell your listeners, I've been accused of being a conspiratorial type person, but there's a benefit to that. I don't have myocarditis.
Absolutely. Now, your Senate sponsor is Paige Wally, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so you guys got to read him in on all this, and he understands it completely?
I'm hoping so. I've certainly funneled information over there for him to go for it. I actually, the reason I asked Paige is because John Lumberg ran this bill in the Senate side the first time we ran it, and it sailed right through the committee. I mean, just right through the committee.
Yep.
And so I called John when he got defeated up here. I called him and I said, you presented it right and did it right, and it zipped right through the committee process over in the Senate side. Who would you recommend running it since you're not there? And he suggested Paige Wally, so that's how he got in the mix.
Well, I've got a friend in Senator Wally's district who's got a real good relationship with him, who also who's aware of this issue and understands the problem. So I think Paige will be good on the Senate side for this. So hopefully, anyway. Well, hey, I appreciate you guys coming on. I appreciate what you do. Any closing thoughts from either one of you or both of you?
No, if you can't sit still anymore. People can't. They can't assume that your government all the time has your best interest. There's a lot of good folks in Nashville. There really is, but they can't keep up with everything. And I wasn't even aware of this till 3 years ago when, like Don said, a constituent of mine came and said, "Have you read this book? Do you know what's happening? Do you see this?" And I said, "Oh, gee whiz." So that's when I called Don's wife, because I'd worked with her on some other stuff. I said, "Anybody do anything on this?" And that's how we got going. But I have to have citizen involvement. I have to have it if we're going to get this bill passed.
Yep.
This is an election year, so your peers listen to their constituents a lot more in an legislative year, election year, than when they do in other years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would just add that there, people that have reached out from many states, they always ask, what can I do? How can I get involved? And so there is a resource available on our website that's got all 50 states. It's got links to the legislative website so you can find your legislators. And it's also got some information, kind of a David Webb and I, after we kept hearing the same bogus arguments against us from the bank lobbyists and from the uniform law commissioners and everybody else, we finally David put together like a 15 of the greatest hits that are up against us, and how we refute them, because we can refute every one of these if we get the opportunity. But like Representative Hulsey said, we're not always with the same level of credibility that somebody lobbyists that they've been working with for 10 years is. But that's available on there too. I tell people, you don't have to become an expert on this. Just get comfortable with a couple of things and get comfortable with the fact that you want to protect your property. And the fundamental role of government is to protect property. I mean, it should be anyway. At least that's how we started. We've got a lot of fundamental roles now, unfortunately. They're nowhere in the Constitution. But I think just focus in on that. Focus in and make it personal, that you don't want to lose your retirement assets, and your legislators will listen.
Yeah, most people, it's hard for them to digest that their stock can be used as collateral on a loan without their permission. That is just foreign to people's thinking. They do not think that can happen.
Yeah. Right.
And you add the derivatives in there, and it happens all the time. You got some stock that's got 6, 7, 8 times what the value of it is.
More than that. I try not to get into that, because once my wife Betty kicks me every time I bring up derivatives, because she doesn't understand them, and it just makes people's eyes glaze over.
I don't either. It just sounds good when I say
it. Yeah, that's the steroid in this whole.
Here's one thing that we always believe, though, we hold on, is the central positive truth. In the words of Festus Hagen, the water will never clear up until you get the pigs out of the creek. And that's it.
Absolutely. That sounds like something Festus would say. Hey, well, I appreciate both of you coming on. I appreciate your time and appreciate what you're doing. And I'd love to have you back on.
Thank you,
Dave. Appreciate it. We'll keep you in the loop as this thing moves forward in Tennessee.
Absolutely. And we'll see. Bud, as soon as you know, I'll help spread the word on when it's going to be in committee, so we can start making those calls.
I'll sure do it.
All right. Thank y'all. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
Now it's time for the Informer Report. Last week, I had Bernadette Pager on the show to discuss House Bill 809, or as I call it, the Poison Protection for Pesticides Act. That bill was taken off notice. Now, that doesn't mean it's dead. It's just taken off notice. We got to watch, make sure it doesn't come back. But there's a couple things I need to cover. During that episode, I brought up some information that I had received concerning Representative Hulsey's position that turned out not to be quite in context. Now, I'm not accusing anybody here of giving me bad information. I think somebody misunderstood something somewhere along the way. And it concerned Bernadette what I brought up really concerned her, and so she contacted Representative Bolso. And the following is her statement, and he's granted her permission to make this statement and to share it. And this is, I'm speaking for Bernadette here. I'm reading off what she sent me. Based on our conversation when I was on your show Wednesday, January 21st, I became concerned that Representative Gino Bolso's explanation to fellow legislators regarding HB 809 were being used out of context to support the bill. I texted Representative Bolso asking him to explain his understanding of HB 809 and whether injured individuals would still be able to sue if it passed. Representative Bolso is an attorney and very precise in his responses. I asked him if I could share his responses, and he said yes. This is his response. It is true that an injured party could sue a pesticide manufacturer for product defect, breach of warranty, negligence, misrepresentation, and other claims, even if HB 809 passed. HB 809 only addresses a claim for failure to warn. Eliminating the failure to warn claim will doom many cases, but not all. Remember that HB 809 applies to all manufacturers of all pesticides. The number and types of claims that could be brought in the future upon various hypothetical facts are too numerous to mention. And this Bernadette asked the question, do you still firmly oppose the bill and the amendment? Now, the amendment didn't get heard. That's what would have been heard had the bill not been taken off schedule. Bolso's response is yes. And she asked, does the amendment conflict with Article 1, Section 6 by removing failure to warn? Representative Bolso, yes. It also conflicts with the 7th Amendment's right to trial by jury in civil matters. Bernadette, may I share your responses with fellow advocates opposing the bill? Representative Bolso, yes. And this is, everything else is all Representative Bolso. In emphasizing the importance of the failure to warn claim, Bernadette, you can point out that in Darnell versus Monsanto, the Missouri case, the U.S. Supreme Court has accepted for review Mr. Darnell brought claims for product defect, failure to warn, and negligence, but only one on the failure to warn claim. He lost the 2 other claims. Without the failure to warn claim, the jury would have returned a defense verdict for Monsanto. So as we discussed on January 21st, Bayer and the pesticides industry know that blocking failure to warn claims dooms most injury lawsuits. That's why they are running similar language in many states. Trial attorneys I have spoken to who focus on product liability law have also explained that product defect, breach of warranty, negligence, misrepresentation, and other claims are very often tied to the approved EPA label. And the pesticide industry has made every intention of ensuring that bills that they have drafted and the amendment that they have drafted and offered up through their lobbying partners like the Tennessee Farm Bureau will ensure that those who are injured have little to no chance of success of holding the pesticide industry accountable. FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, and the EPA don't require pesticides to be proven safe. Manufacturers are only required to show them not to cause unreasonably adverse effects on the environment, which includes impacts on human health, wildlife, and ecosystems. But EPA does not require any such proof for full product formulations, like what's on the shelf at Lowe's and Walmart. Industry only has to provide evidence that the active ingredient on its own doesn't cause unreasonably adverse effects. Of course, industry-funded science and independent science come to opposing conclusions on active ingredients. US 7C 136A C5, registration of pesticides. The administrator, EPA, shall register a pesticide if it's determined that, among other things, when used in accordance with widespread and commonly recognized practice, it will not generally cause unreasonably adverse effects on the environment. The term unreasonably adverse effects on the environment is defined in 7 USC. Any unreasonable risk to man or the environment, taking into account the economic, social, and environmental costs and benefits of the use of such pesticide, or a human dietary risk from residues that result from the use of pesticide in, on, or around food, inconsistent with the standard under Section 408 of the FDA Act, and I have no clue what that is. Failure to warn liability is a cornerstone of consumer protection, providing critically important, actually absolutely essential financial incentives for companies to disclose serious hidden risk. Failure to warn lawsuits expose fraud. Legislators for HB 809 told me last week they understood the bill blocks failure to warn cases as if this is no big deal. Now, this is Bernadette talking now. I want to repeat that again. Legislators for HB 809 told me last week they understand the bill blocks failure to warn cases as if this is no big deal. It's a huge deal. Why are they okay with shielding fraud? Why are Tennessee legislators willing to block Tennesseans' right to failure to warn claims? Why are they okay with impinging on our constitutional right to this key legal avenue? HB 809 must not pass, and there is no amendment that can fix it. So there you have it. If some legislators have been led to believe that Representative Hulsey was just going to say that injured parties could still sue, that's technically true, but it's much more nuanced than that. Keep an eye on this legislation. They may actually try to bring it back. So I just wondered, I thought that was worth sharing because I don't know exactly, the bill wasn't heard, but I know that there were some legislators who apparently believed what they were told by whoever, and I don't know who told them that, hey, Hulsey, and Hulsey is very respected up there, very smart guy, good lawyer, knows the Constitution. And I'm sure that some of them just understood that, hey, he's going to say, no, you can still sue. But there's more to it than that. So I thought it was worthwhile. He approved us putting this information out, so I just wanted to share it with you. So keep an eye also on HB 1729 by Slater. Now, this bill, by the way, this bill does not have a Senate sponsor yet, but that could change. Granted, they're running out of time, but just be aware of it. This bill would allow the state greater control over homeschool testing requirements. And now this is from a state that has an abysmal record of improving results, but they want to get involved with the homeschool stuff. Right now, as I said, there's no Senate sponsor, but just keep an eye on this one. Hopefully it'll go away. There's another bill you need to keep an eye on. That's SB 1968 by Senator Lowe and House Bill 1823 by Raper. The bill gives the state more power over your children as well on the issue of truancy. Now, I'm going to read part of this bill, okay? And I read it yesterday, and I'm just kind of hitting the highlights of it here. If a student withdraws from an LEA in which the student was receiving Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention pursuant to the LEA, and LEA is Local Education Association, LEA's progressive truancy plan, and the student does not transfer to another LEA as defined in law. Now, when they say that does not transfer to another LEA as defined in law, think homeschool, private schools, so on and so forth. Then the director of schools shall report the student's absence to the judge with juvenile jurisdiction in the county in which the student resides. Each case must be dealt with in such a manner as the judge may determine to be in the best interest of the student, consistent with existing law. Now, a couple things. Parents know what's best for their kids. Now, do all parents do what's best for their kids? No. But I'm leery of any legislation that wants to give somebody other than the parent more control over the kid. Those are parental rights. Like I say, some parents don't do a good job. Some do, but that doesn't make it a judge's job in all situations. I mean, if you're not talking about threats of, if it's not an abuse case, not a neglect case, we need to be real careful about doing this kind of stuff. So I'm going to continue with what I read. In the event a student in kindergarten through grade 12 is adjudicated to be unruly because the student has accumulated 5 days or more of unexcused absences during any school year. I'll read that again. In the event a student in K through 12 is adjudicated to be unruly because the student has accumulated 5 days or more of unexcused absences during any school year, the judge may assess a fine up to $50 or community service at the discretion of the judge against the parent or legal guardian. 5 days is an unruly child. I mean, you could have a death in the family that required you to travel a long way. Or hey, what if you lose one of the other parents? This is insane. This is that whole train. Number one, we know that all the funding for education is based on head count. Okay, it's based on head count, and then they dictate how many days a year your kid has to be in school, and they can only have so. Look, I know it's been to a great degree, it's been this way for a long time, but in terms of how much control the state exerts over our kids through the school system, we need to really think hard about this, and we definitely don't need to give them any more. I don't think an unruly kid is somebody that misses 5 days a year. That's ridiculous. That's nothing. And shouldn't it be taken into consideration? Okay, well, is it the fact that they missed? What if they're taking their work with them? What if they understand? What if they're doing just as well as, shouldn't that play into it somewhere? Are they still passing the test? Are they still completing the work, even if they're having to make it up? So this is ridiculous. This is more power for the state and less for the parents. A referral to juvenile court for conduct described in subsection, which is what I just read, it has to be accompanied by a statement from the director of the school certifying that the school applied the progressive truancy interventions of the progressive truancy plan adopted under subsection D for the student while the student was enrolled in the LEA, and the student withdrew from the LEA and has not enrolled in another LEA, meaning homeschool, private school, whatever you want to call it. So this extends state power over your children in a state that harps on parental choice in support of the voucher plan. It's all parental choice for vouchers. It's the right thing to do. That's what they tell us all the time. But 5 unexcused absences are reason enough to leave this decision to a judge. Visit freeyourchildren.com for more information on this and other homeschool and parental rights issues. Now, I think there's an update to the next story I'm getting ready to read you. The Chester County GOP was hosting a Reagan Day event Saturday, February 21st, billed as Meet Your Next Candidate for Governor. But they originally only invited Blackburn and Rose. These guys being bought off? Are they scared? What's going on? Seat is limited to 200. Sounds like a rhino herd event to me, but I did hear that they may be backing off that, and that Representative Fritz may be invited to that event. So I haven't got 100% confirmation on that. But no GOP in this state should be hosting a gubernatorial event without at least inviting all three. I understand there's going to be situations where all three of them can't be there, but there should always be the invite. Now, I'm not against them inviting one. That's fine and well. They can have them come one at a time. But if you're going to make it sound like, hey, here's your choices, and you only invite 2 out of the 3, something's wrong. Okay, our House GOP, this is at the federal level now. They continue to fund NED, which is the National Endowment for Democracy. They voted for this last week, to the tune of $350 million, with 81 Republicans joining the Democrats. This was one program on the DOGE list to cut due to fraud and waste. It's also known for spreading left-wing ideology. They also ignored Trump's plan to slash billions out of the Department of Ed, and they pretty much funded the Department of Ed at current levels. Is this winning? Is this anybody's idea of winning? There's cuts. There's Trump wants cuts in certain things, and things like NED were identified by DOGE, and we know they push left-wing garbage. We know that. but we got Republicans funding it. But we do have some good news. And this is, hey, thank you, President Trump, for this one. We are out of the WHO, the World Health Organization. Now, I'm sure there are probably still some strings here and there, and I know a couple of people who could probably lay all those strings out for me, okay? But we are, from everything I can tell, getting out of it, or in the latter stages of getting out of it, and that's a good thing. Hey guys, if you haven't heard, the value of the dollar is continuing to decline, and gold and silver are on the rise. Now, I'm not a financial guy, but you might want to think about at least buying you some old silver. If you can't afford to buy a lot, because it's roughly 120 an ounce now for just silver. That's just silver. Gold's like 54, 55 for an ounce. Go look, you can go find some 90% silver. Start with the quarters if that's all you can do. You want to be prepared. Dollar becomes worth less and less all the time. Are we going to have a war with Iraq? We moved an armada in there, and I saw where Trump said, hey, he's warning Iran, their time is running out. Like I said, there was a lot of times in the past that we should have dealt with Iran. We should have dealt with them when they were killing our guys in Iraq. We should have dealt with them in 1983 when they blew up our embassy, killed 240 some Marines. There's plenty of times we should have done something, and as bad as I feel for the people over there, and as much as I hope that they can successfully remove this regime on their own, and I'd love to see them return to what they once were, that's their fight. It's not our fight. And I wish Trump had never said, hey, hold on, we're coming. That's just wrong. It's not our fight. How about we focus on getting rid of the illegals, communists, and Muslims that are here? We've got Islamist communities popping up all over the place. These guys have a lot of power. They've gained a lot of political. They laid it out almost 30 years ago in their memorandum for understanding, to explain what they were here for and what they were here to do. But it's been ignored. This is even after Hamas decades ago were declared a terrorist organization. And the Muslim Brotherhood, they recently declared a couple of the chapters of the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorists, but the whole Muslim Brotherhood, they got the same ideology no matter where they are. I don't know why we can't get this administration to see that. I don't know why they won't declare them a terrorist entity. Now, proving somebody's actually in a Muslim Brotherhood is harder, okay, to be sure. But all of the organizations stem from the Muslim Brotherhood. All right, Minnesota and ICE. Man, there's a lot of things to talk about here. As far as ICE goes in Minnesota. So let's the shooting, and I'm just going to deal with the most recent shooting, okay? Now, I don't think that the guy that got shot, the nurse or whatever, I don't think he's just your average. First off, the whole protest thing is a bunch of garbage, okay? These people are attempting to interfere with ICE, who has the legitimate responsibility of arresting illegal aliens, okay? But they are trying to make their life hard. And now this guy, we've got other tapes of him from earlier. He's not necessarily this peaceful guy who was just there to protest, or was just there at the wrong time. There's video of him kicking an ICE vehicle and having to be detained there for a minute. But so I do think he was working. Look, they have a very organized group of communists there, very, very organized, and they've got people on the watch. They are tracking ICE. They're letting the people know, hey, ICE is here. They're going to be here. They're watching them the whole time and are reporting back. They've got that whole signal thread. The state government there, from the governor, the attorney general, the mayors, they're all culpable in this as well, because they're all part of this. I mean, this is a left-wing revolution going on in our country right now. And we're just seeing it in Montana, but it's other places as well. And so they bear some responsibility for what happened. Now, I want to talk just a little bit about the actual shooting. I've seen the videos from the different angles. Like I say, I don't think this guy's a saint by any means, but, and I understand cops of any type, ICE or whatever, have a dangerous job. I got that. And I understand, I guess current law is, if they say that he was reaching for something and they thought he was reaching for, but I don't think this was a good shoot. Okay. I just don't. I don't think it was a good shoot. We can't see all the angles, but the guy's on the ground. He's, I think at the time, on his knees, and he's got 2 or 3 guys on him. I don't know how he could have reached for anything. Okay. And if he could have reached for something, I'm just wondering what are those 2 or 3 guys doing there? But it also looked as if the shots were in the back. So I got a problem with that. And oh, by the way, it was not just like one shot. There was one shot, there was a delay, and there were several other shots. Okay. Yeah. I don't think it's a good shoot. I just don't. I know there may be some cops out there. Look, I'm not anti-cop by any means, but we've got bad actors in all professions. Professions are honorable, people not so much. Okay. I don't think it was a good shoot. Now, having said that, I don't think we should back off one bit. I think Trump is making a mistake if he backs off. And I'm already hearing he's going to, although he did send Tom Holman, and a little nuance there. Hey, Tom Holman says, look, we'll start getting ICE out of here if we start getting more cooperation from state and local government. And kind of hinted that, okay, yeah, we won't be pulling back. Now, they got the Border Patrol guy out of there. They got that clown out of there, and they got the people that came with him, and they've sent them elsewhere. But as far as ICE goes, from what I understand, Tom Holman controls that. And so we'll see how that works. But I think it's a mistake to back off. Okay. You're only going to encourage the communist if you back off in this case. And, oh, by the way, there's a lot of people that will say, but come the midterms, if you back off and you don't really crack down on this and things get worse, because, it will get worse if you back off, then we already think, it already appears to me and a lot of other people that the GOP deliberately wants to throw the midterms so that that Trump can be truly a lame duck and probably be impeached and removed as well. And I think a lot in the GOP, a lot of our elected officials, I think they'd be fine with that. But a lot of us are not going to be happy with that. And we're certainly not going to be happy if we still have all these illegal aliens, and not just the violent ones. We need to get rid of all of them. Yes, get rid of the violent ones first, but get rid of all of them. And if in the process of arresting a violent one, you happen to notice the other guy with him or close by is here, maybe not violent, maybe not a long track record, but he's got the record that he's here illegal, that's all you need. Get rid of it. So I hope he doesn't back down. I hope he stays strong on this. I hope they do something to get more agents in the field, because everything I'm reading, at the current rate that we're deporting, it's going to take over 100 years to get all the ones that came in since the Biden administration. Now, I don't have the numbers for how many have self-deported. Okay. And I don't know if anybody actually knows that or not. I will say this. As much as we need to be in Minnesota dealing with the Somalis, definitely get rid of those clowns and deal with the fraud up there that they've uncovered. It does bother me that I saw something the other day in the paper, and it was about the 5 southern states, I think Texas, Louisiana, North Carolina, Georgia, and one other. It may have been Tennessee, but I'm not sure, that they've only deported something like 150,000. There's a lot more than 150,000 in those 5 southern states, and those are all red states. Especially if things don't go our way in the midterms. If we haven't got those guys out of here by then, we're not going to get rid of them. And don't kid yourself for a minute. The rhino establishment in all those states would love to keep some cheap labor around. So that's something to watch as well. Now, back to the shooting. One of the things I really didn't like after the shooting was the response by the administration. I'm talking Nome, I'm talking the Border Patrol guy, the FBI director, and Trump. First off, they tried to say, well, this guy was, he was there with a gun and he had, more than one magazine, and he was there to do damage. I'm like, you don't know that. And what's so strange about living in a big city and carrying a gun with an extra magazine? It's probably a smart thing to do, because guess what? Even though he's a lefty, more than likely, from all indications, that doesn't mean that Minnesota is not a dangerous place. Bigger concern is this response that we've heard that, well, you just can't go around with a gun. You can't just walk around. You can't go to an area where there's being a protest and carry a gun. That's insane. We have something called the Second Amendment, which, to be honest with you, the Trump administration doesn't have a very good record on. And Bondi certainly doesn't have a very good record on it. I don't really think we can trust the Trump administration with their Second Amendment. I'm not saying we could trust the Biden administration or any of the other administrations. I'm just saying they're not really good on the Second Amendment. And the things they've been saying lately prove it. And it's a concern when the FBI director doesn't have any more sense than to say, well, you can't go armed to a protest. You can't use that gun illegally at a protest. And if you have a gun on you and you're protesting and you do something to get in a scuffle with law enforcement and they think you're going for a gun, whether they know you actually have one or not, then yeah, you could get shot. All right. That's just putting that out there. We can't have, though, one thing we can't have, because I said I have a problem with this shooting. I think it was wrong. I think it was overboard. I think people need to be held accountable on this one. That cannot be a reason to back off. You get rid of the bad actors from ICE or Border Patrol or whatever. You deal with them. They need to be dealt with. But, we pull them out, we put other people in, and we keep on. We don't stop because we had some bad actors in law enforcement. We don't stop. We get rid of them. We retrain. If we need to retrain other people, make sure they know how to do things right. And when not to shoot somebody, do it. But you don't back off. And once again, all the fraud has to be prosecuted. That wraps up this installment of the Informer Report. If you have a news story that you want to alert us to, be sure to send us an email at tninformer.tv@gmail.com. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to watch the program tonight. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, so please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notification bell, so you never miss an episode. Guys, we really need to hit the 1,000 subscriber number. We're at about 850, so need your help on that. Doesn't cost anything, just need you to subscribe and tell your friends about the show. Thanks again to David Baldwin for his generous recent donation and support. We really appreciate it. Check out our audio podcast on iHeart as well, Spotify and other platforms. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, tninformer.com. Find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Monty Fritz will be speaking at Lucille's Cafe, 2231 Madison Street, Clarksville, Tennessee, on 31 January. That's this Saturday at 6:30 p.m. Come out and meet Monty and get your questions answered. Monty takes questions from the crowd, okay? He doesn't have to have them pre-screened. He takes questions from the crowd. Remember, veterans, Monty is the only veteran in the race. Join us next Monday when our guest for our first show at 7 p.m. will be Vanessa Miller. She joins us to give an update on ISHA and some information on some concerning real estate deals and the issue of potential elder abuse. Then at 8:30, Mindy Esposito joins us to talk about her organization, the Southern Independence Association, and their mission. Please take time to check out our other shows brought to you by West Tennessee TV by going to westtntv.com or myparistv.com. You can find links to the Mike Weatherford Show and Sportcast with Jerry Bucklew. Next Tuesday, Mike welcomes singer-songwriter Rick Revel for the premiere and debut of his newest hit song and music video, Singing River, shot all around West Tennessee as well as Muscle Shoals. Don't miss that. Then Sunday, February 1st, 7:30 p.m. on Sportscast, Jeremy welcomes head coach Chris Nelson from the Bethel Ladies Wildcats basketball program. They claimed the number 3 spot in the NAIA Coaches Bowl. Find out all about this next Sunday. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.